Hi, this is Frank Moreno of Mahogany Rush, and you're listening to Poppitt's Corner.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of Poppitt's Corner, another episode. I'm super excited, as always, to do these with the fine folks here at all of the local metal community, especially the metal community around the world. But I'd like to bring on my good buddy, Mr. Jason Thomas, aka is it Corpsey? I'm assuming, or Corpse, or however it is you pronounce it, from the mighty Stygian Crown and Gravehill and a bunch of other projects we will get into. Jason, how you doing, man? Thanks so much again for coming on and hanging. It's gonna be good.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm glad we originally linked up at the San Diego Swap Meet, and this came out of it. And I was like, yeah, let's sit down. I think I was telling you before, I was being a little bit too humble about why would anybody want to talk to me, but I told you I was going to switch it up.
I
Why
like it.
wouldn't you talk to me? I mean, come on.
I like it. Yeah, no, I really, like I said, I really do appreciate you giving me a couple minutes of your time to pretty much, I'm just going to go through your entire career and learn a little bit about you and hopefully, tell some killer stories in between. So if you're ready, man, I'd just love to get started and just talk shop with you.
Yeah, let's do it, man.
So can you give me some of your first kind of recollections of when you heard music for the first time and kind of what was the band?
Yeah, some of my first things that I heard were like country music from my mom. She was really into country music, and she was into the modern stuff at the time in the late 70s from what I my earliest recollection, like the Eagles and Elvis and things like that. But primary country music, and then she would play Dolly Parton, and I would go in and get her Dolly Parton cassette tape. And you remember those little small cassette recorders, and just pop it in and listen to working 9 to 5, or whatever songs that she had going on. And I used to listen and enjoy listening to Dolly Parton, and that's like one of my first real memories of listening to music.
Now, what about her specifically did it for you? Was it her vocal style? Was it the way that the whole band was together? Was it just like the overall sound of it? I'm assuming you were listening to it on like a couple pair of headphones like these or something. So, did you get an overall just vibe of like, oh, this is killer. This is what music is. This is awesome. I'm loving this.
Well, I don't know what my exact mindset was, as I was probably around 5 or 6 at the time. So my that's like kind of like the early recollection of like the first thing I listened to. What turned me on about it? I can't put my finger on it. It was just I didn't have headphones. I just put it on the little cassette, and I would just sit there and listen to this cassette tape. And it might have been it's probably her voice. We all know Dolly Parton's an amazingly talented woman, and I guess I just knew it back then. It wasn't anything that I followed through on though. After I started listening to other things, um, like I would listen to the radio after that and just hear Cool and the Gang. And then Cool and the Gang was one of the first cassette tapes my mom ever bought for me as a kid. The classic Celebrate, song that you hear everywhere now. Um, that and The Police was another early cassette tape that I love. The Police that I heard on the radio, at least. And my mom went out and bought me Synchronicity when it came out and had that on cassette tape. I
So,
think I still have those cassette tapes.
so that was early. That was early '80s.
Yeah.
There's like 81 or 82, I think, when Significant came out, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. So you must have been what, 8 or 9?
Yeah,
How
let's see. What's the math? I was born in 74, so
Oh yeah, so you were around 7 or 8.
yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of interesting because, obviously you heard something different at an early age and it probably made you more appreciative of other styles of music. So you
Yeah.
weren't necessarily it's kind of cool that you weren't necessarily just into rock music and then branch off from there. So it's what I think that might have I don't know. Everything always leads to the beginning. So I'm assuming you just have an eclectic style of music just from listening to things like Dolly Parton and I'm sure John Denver and
Yep.
things of this kind of style of nature and folk artists that you and your mom kind of appreciated together.
Yeah, and she listened to that stuff, but, once I got that Police album, she wasn't into the Police. She didn't really care for them, but I started to care for them. And I don't know if that kinda gave me a sense of individuality as I was pulling away from my mom musically when it came to that. But I'd watch Casey Kasem's top 10 countdown, video countdown, or listen to the popular stuff on the radio, and then I'd start listening. 80s new wave was very popular, and I would buy the little 45 singles of Flock of Seagulls or Madness or Duran Duran. And then I heard probably the most heaviest song I heard that was out on the radio at the time was Quiet Riot's Come On Feel the Noise. And that's why I was like, this is different from all the other stuff I've been listening to. So I remember buying that on the little 45 single.
So, what about that specific song did it for you? Were you just turned on more to the heaviness of it, or because obviously you're listening to styles like funk and country and even rock and rock music like the Police that you had mentioned, but Quiet Riot compared to the Police is kind of a whole different ball game in terms
Yeah.
of heaviness and a style that like maybe you weren't familiar with. So were you kind of drawn to the overall kind of vibe of the heaviness or the guitars per se or the vocal style? What about that specific track did it for you?
Yeah, I think it might have been the vocal style because I'd never heard anybody sing like that up to this point. Most people had, I mean, not Kevin DuBrow had a great melodic, heavy voice, but back in those days, I thought, Sting had a great, heavy, melodic voice. I didn't realize that you could put that gruffness into that, and make it really powerful. And it sounded powerful, and it really kind of changed my outlook, at that time. So I started then that's what the point where I was like, well, let me look for something harder in the record stores that would kind of float around that. And again, I'm still a young kid, and I wasn't buying my own albums. My mom was buying my. If I said I wanted something, she wouldn't immediately buy it for me, but she would look at it and she'd be like, "Are you sure?" Kind of thing. And one of those, I remember one of those times was buying Twisted Sisters. Um,
Stay Hungry or
Stay Hungry.
you
It
can't
was the
stop rock and
single.
roll or okay.
Is the Stay Hungry single, and I think on the front was D. Snyder with a big raw bone in his hand, and he's looking all decked out. And that's when she actually looked at it. She's like, "Are you sure you want this?" I was like, "Yes." And so, and
What
that
you
was a sight unseen. I had not heard Twisted Sister. I only liked what I saw on the cover, and after hearing the music, of course, I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, we need to get more Twisted Sister."
interested? So how were you just perusing through the bins? Did you say, and you found the single and said, "Oh, this looks interesting," or
Yeah.
did you hear him on MTV? Okay. So
Yeah, I hadn't heard him on MTV up to that point, but then probably, like, it's weird how, for example, you see, like, a movie, and you see a certain actor in that movie, and suddenly every show that you see afterward or movie, you start seeing that actor in that movie, and you're like, "Wait a minute, how did I not know about this?" And that's how Twisted Sister was. It's like I knew Twisted Sister was out there, and then all of a sudden I started recognizing, the singles and the music video, and then I can't even think of what is the most popular one that they have that
oh, we're not gonna take it, or I wanna rock,
We're
or
not gonna take it came out, and that's when I was sold. I was like, "Okay, we're gonna get that one too."
how much of MTV played into your early discoverings of music per se, though? Did it come in later or not at all, or
So in those days, I wasn't really we didn't have cable. So I didn't have MTV probably until '86. So, in those early days, I was watching, like I said, Casey Kasem's top 10 video countdown was on regular network television on a Saturday, finish up watching my cartoons, and then near the afternoon, Casey Kasem's would come on, and of course I'd always listen to the radio. And I'm sure you've heard the same story of people getting cassette tape and recording their favorite songs off the radio, and that's what I would do. But once once we did get cable, yeah, MTV started really coming into play when it came to my musical decisions and what I wanted to listen to.
did you start having friends kind of give you music to listen to and discover bands that way as well? Or when did that? Because I know all of us have that. So, I mean, saying for you personally, when did that specific event take place?
Yeah. That so at that point, my friends and I were kind of on the same wavelengths of listening to the same things. We'd introduce each other, like Twisted Sister or Quiet Riot. And I think around that time, Crew was getting really popular, and a lot of the hair metal stuff was really kind of taking off. And so we would start introducing ourselves to this kind of music, uh, and then I can't remember the exact year, but a kid moved into our neighborhood. At this time, we didn't have long hair. I mean, I wore like a jean jacket, with maybe one patch on it, but this kid moves into our neighborhood, and he's got long brown hair, got his patches. I mean, classic Slayer, and I didn't even heard of these bands, and he was our age, and he said, "Yeah, come on over." He says, "It's so good to see you guys." He recognized like a Metallica patch that I had on,
Oh, so
and
you knew of Metallica back then. I mean, and where I'm going with this is Metallica didn't have any videos back
right,
then.
yeah.
So that's a heavy band to discover,
So I
without
did,
any airplay.
yeah. So I did gloss over that. A friend of mine did bring over Ride the Lightning, and at that point that had been the only Metallica I heard. And when Fight Fire kicks in, I mean that flipped me into this heavy realm of I need to have more of this. And it was shortly after that, I remember getting that patch at the local state fair in Florida because I saw it. I was like, I gotta have it. It's the old Metallica logo, and that's the only patch I had for a long time on my jacket. And then my friend moved in. His name's Gary. I still keep in touch with him on Facebook, actually. Um, going over to his
Interesting.
yeah, going over to his house, and he invited us over. I mean, I hadn't heard Slayer at that point, and he had Rain and Blood. I think Rain and Blood had really just kind of come out, and he had Omen and
Oh, it's a great
Fate's
album too.
Warning, and I mean, he had the shit. And I just borrowed his tapes. Because we were walking distance of our houses. He was like 4 houses down, and so I'd grab a couple of tapes and record them. I had blank tapes, and I just record all these tapes, and then listening to Rain and Blood and all these classics, that threw me over the edge. That really did throw me over the edge. So,
So
yeah.
you glossed over something that I want to touch upon. And I didn't know this fact. You're originally from Florida?
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of curious, when your friend moved in a couple houses down, where was he initially from? Like the Bay Area? Because not like I said, the Slayer thing, I mean, it wasn't well known that Slayer was
Yeah.
was popular. So, I mean, how was he discovering these bands? Did he kind of say, "Oh yeah, I'm from this area and that's where these bands are from," or
Maybe that was the selfish part of me, but I never asked him, where he heard these bands from. I always he was from the East Coast, and he came from up north. I think he was up in the New England somewhere, and then his family moved down to Florida, and eventually moved back up to New England, later years later. But yeah, I never really asked him how or where he found these bands. I was just absorbing them all like some kind of sentient fucking
like a
beast.
sponge,
Yeah,
dude?
like a sponge.
Um, so let's go to, the next stages of your musical styles kind of changing, and you're discovering bands like Slayer and I don't know, maybe Merciful Fate or something from your neighbor and whatnot. But where was the transition for you to, I don't know, play an instrument or just hang around a bunch of other musicians? Were you doing that around this specific time, or is this kind of way later in your journey?
Yeah, so that's another thing where this guy Gary really inspired me because he came down and knew how to play guitar. And I'm not saying he was the best guitarist in the world I ever heard, but it's the first time I saw a person who played that type of music on a little small combo amp with a piece of shit guitar, and still I'm like was blown away. He's playing Fight Fire with Fire. I want to know how to play Fight Fire with Fire. And he would teach me some things, but eventually I just went out and begged my mom to buy me a cheap guitar and I found it was like old it's called a PV Nitro. I don't know if you've heard of those. Not very expensive, and but Pop got that and got a little combo amp, a little distortion pedal, and we would sit in my garage and he would show me riffs and I would play the riffs, and then eventually he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna play this part, and you need to play these notes at the same time," and then we started getting into more the Iron Maiden because I was technically listening to Iron Maiden at the time, wasn't too far into them at the moment, but once we started playing the riffs, because he started showing me like Loneliness of a Long Distance Runner and how that song starts out and the multiple guitars, and we were just playing. I was like, oh, I need to get this tape.
But were you what gravitated you towards the guitar, do you think? When watching your friend kind of play at first?
Just that's it's a good question because I think it's just I was really influenced by him and by the bands that I listened to at the time. I did love vocals. I loved listening to good vocalists, but I think at the time it was more about the guitars and the band. And I think that was me trying to justify some things in my life that was going on, mainly being a Christian. I was a full fledged. I went to church, and my mom, full fledged Christian. So some of the bands I was listening to, the album art, the musical content, the lyrics weren't really jiving. So I would justify it to myself. Well, I'm not really paying attention to the lyrics, but I do love the music. And then, those are just little teenage things you're trying to sort out for yourself. And so I think at the time I was really into guitar, um, but I was just trying to justify like the lyrics and the other, the vocals. Well, those are cool, but they're not paramount right now. It's eventually obviously turned another direction altogether, but
Sure. Well, so let's go towards like the late 80s, early 90s. What were you kind of doing around this specific time period? Did you formulate your first band around this time, or this again a later stage in your career? Or because I know
yeah.
we're going to get to the military aspect of you as well. I would like to touch upon that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but around like this particular time period, did you start to play with your friends and formulate a band?
Yeah, yeah. So we're still in high school, and I'm learning guitar, and I'm picking up. I like to think pretty fast, and most of the time that's total self taught. I'm sure where I would pick up these song books, music books, tablature books, I should say, at the record store, and try to learn my favorite songs. By the way, years later, I learned that most of that tablature was either completely wrong or it was so hard to position fingers that I didn't know there was other notes you could play that weren't that cramped your hand up. So anyways, yeah. So I would try to learn those songs, completely fail at them, but I get the gist of them. But yeah, my friend, my other good friend, he plays guitar. He still plays guitar, but he played guitar back then. We're probably on the same level. And he and another friend of ours who played bass, they were mostly into Iron Maiden, but a lot of the more hair metal stuff that was going on too. Iron Maiden was just kind of thrown into there, and I was into the harder stuff. And I was like, I wanted to write and play hard music, and they wanted to write um, catchy hair rock and metal. And now I'm like, fuck, I wish I'd like gone in with them on that. But at the time, you're just a speed freak, and you want everything to be fast and evil and heavy. And we found a drummer who didn't play double bass, but he could play a single bass drum like a son of a bitch. So that was kind of like our first little rock band that we had in high school.
What was the name of it, if you don't mind me asking?
It was it was a name called Mad Hatter. Mad Hatter, yeah. And we lifted that from this guy because he said, but this guy didn't play in bands or anything. He didn't know how to play instrument, but he said to us, "Says, oh, if I had a band, I'd name it Mad Hatter." We're like, "Oh, that's what we're gonna name our band then." He's like, "You can't do that. You're stealing from me." It's like, you don't play an instrument. We're gonna name our band that. So yeah, we lifted that.
So around this time, did you actually record any demos with this band, or play live with them, or play original material, or were you just doing the cover circuit?
We did some covers. We did mostly covers, and then we started writing our own stuff. We didn't record any demos. And yeah, at the time we weren't clear on how to even record. I mean, it was just like put a boombox in the middle of the jam room and press record on the cassette tape player. Um, those are long lost. We did play like one little backyard party. Um, but yeah, it didn't really go anywhere. But those guys, I mean, well, one of the guys I'm still good friends with. I don't know what happened to the other guys. But it kind of it was a great introduction into how a band works and group dynamics and how to play together with other people and in a rhythmic fashion that had drums, because before I wasn't playing it with drums, or I'd play along with cassette tapes. I'd tune my guitar to whatever band I was listening to, and I would play along with them. But live, that was a great introduction to that.
So when was the transition from this particular band to the kind of the next stages of your life, and what were you doing around the early 90s?
Yeah, so I was still in high school, late or early 90s. I didn't graduate until 92, but I hadn't I wasn't totally into death metal at the time. I remember picking up I think I had Death Spiritual Healing on cassette. Again, these are all things I would just buy based on face value alone because there was no way for me to really preview these things. So I just go in the record store, look at records and look at cassettes, and I was like, "Oh, Death, this looks rad. I'm gonna pick it up." And the vocals threw me off. I was like, "Wow, this is a time when the vocals actually did throw me off." I wasn't into that kind of vocals. I'm into the Hetfield or Mustaine kind of style, and so I put it to the side and still concentrated on a more of a regular heavy metal, fast thrash metal outfit. And those uh those days it was hard to find a musician or musicians because you'd have to there's like free magazines that would put at the music store, and that's the way you would find musicians in the local area, guitarist available, whatever. And so I would like, oh, this guy's into King Diamond, this guy's into Maiden, he's into Metallica, and he says he got a full band, so I'm gonna go over and rehearse with him. And they would invite me, and we'd rehearse, and it seemed to be going great. And then suddenly the band would concave in on itself. And I mean, again, you know how these things work. And
Sure. So you're in Florida though, and I'm just kind of curious, how familiar were you with the death metal scene around you, or were you just completely just oblivious to what was going on around? Because again, Florida is literally the metal capital like of the world.
yeah, especially during that era.
Yeah.
And I was oblivious to, when you're living in the middle of history, sometimes you just don't know you're living in the middle of history. And there were places that we would go that were like metalhead hangouts, and this is like,
Crystal.
Crystal Springs in Florida. I think it's Crystal Springs in Florida, that where all the metalheads would go and hang out. And if you remember that video, The Philosopher, that from Death, it was filmed there. And Chuck and those guys would all hang out. But I didn't know who Chuck was at the time. But if you had long hair and you listen to heavy metal, this is the place to congregate. So I mean, I was kind of oblivious. Late as I was getting out of high school, I started attending more backyard gigs, and more death metal bands were around at that time. There was a great one called Killing Addiction from Ocala, Florida. That blew me away. I was like, these vocals, I like these vocals now. It's like for some reason, but I wasn't completely sold on it. Because
Interesting.
Deicide was out at the time, and
Uh-huh.
the self-titled Deicide came out. And I remember my friend and I were listening to At Death's Door. It's a comp tape full of death metal songs, and I'd bought it. And so we sat down and listened to it. And when we heard Dead by Dawn, uh, that solidified death metal for me. I mean, it was just like, I'm into this. And that was it. I would try to pick up anything death metal after that.
Interesting, because Glenn's vocals around this particular era weren't as guttural as what they became, so he probably still had the style of the Hetfield and Tom Araya and Kronos from Venom, but it was a little bit more heavier, but it was still enough to kind of sink you into that specific style where it wasn't overblown vocally
Right.
speaking.
It wasn't Cannibal Corpse,
Yes.
Cannibal Corpse was at the time was so guttural and you couldn't understand anything. And still at the time, I was like, I heard Deicide and I could understand the lyrics and hear what he was doing, but at the same time, he had this power and evilness about it that just gave me goosebumps. And I was like, that sold me on death metal. So
Did you start to see more death metal bands like around this specific time period after kind of discovering Dead by Dawn, or starting to see all the the Deaths play or the Deicides play or the Nocturnuses or whatever it is you were into?
yeah, I got into Nocturnus. I was in a Acheron at the time, was down in Florida, and so I got to see backyard parties with them. And at the time, death was already pretty damn big. Morbid Angel, I mean, all those bands. Nocturnus, I don't know how big they were back then, but I never got a chance to see them. I wish I could say I had, and say I was there at that show at this time, and I wasn't. Most of the time, I was too young to get in a lot of those clubs that a lot of those bands played in. I was still 19, something like that, 18, 19 years old. So even if I wanted to go, they wouldn't even let me in uh, for the 21 and over shows. So, uh, but I remember seeing flyers for them and wishing I could go. And a lot of them were really far away too. Florida is not a wide state, but it's a very long state. And sometimes they'd be playing in Jacksonville, and Jacksonville was like 4 hours away. They'd be playing south and near Miami, and Miami was like 6 hours away. And for a kid who barely has been driving for a year and a half or 2 years,
Oh,
it's
it's a
like,
little bit too much.
yeah. And a Volkswagen too. I had a Volkswagen 74 Super Beetle that it could barely get around town. So I'm not going to drive 6 hours to Miami to,
Right.
but
Um, let's venture into what you were doing in the mid '90s to like the early 2000s. What was your life like around that specific time period?
yeah. So I graduated from high school, and I was still working full time at a grocery store at the time. So my hair was long, but they didn't allow long hair at the store. But they did allow us to wear the store caps with the logo on it. And so that's what I did. I'd wrap my hair up because I was like shaved at the bottom. It looked nice and neat, and put it up into the hat. And no one knew anything about that. So I would go and work. And then a group of us had another band, and we started getting death metal bands, starting having our own death metal bands. One was called Azathoth, and we started playing and practicing with that. And there's a demo that's out somewhere that was recorded. And then I played with another band that we formed with it's kind of like the LA scene a little bit, 'cause people kind of like, it's very incestuous relationships with one guitar playing this or that, but all of it. So some of us went off and formed another death metal band. That one was called Abhorrence, and played a few live shows, and that one could have probably gone somewhere. There was some trouble with our vocalist, who got in some serious in trouble with the law. And but those are things that, like, we would get parties up, and this like 92, 93, 94. We put flyers out, and they'd be these evil fucking flyers with skulls and Satan and dark worshipers, and Abhorrence with a bunch of other like local bands and death metal. And it got to be where like these backyard parties were drawing like 100+ people, just storming on just to do something on a Saturday night in mid Florida, in Central Florida. Those got
So it didn't
shut down quite a bit, actually. But
so it didn't matter how much material you had at that time. People just kind of wanted to venture and do something.
yeah, yeah.
Interesting. So I'm assuming did you ever make a full length record around this time, or an EP at least, or something like professionally looking, where I don't know where it would get around, or was it just all kind of these kind of one off demos?
It was just like the one-off demos, and like I said, playing live and getting around. Yeah, but I wish we had recorded some stuff. I know I have videotape footage. I still have that archived somewhere of those old bands, together and practicing. A couple were live shows and everything, but that started to die off. I was in another band after that. It was a three-piece. I was playing bass. This is when it kind of did a little slight transfer over to bass. Our guitarist didn't want to switch off, so he wanted to play guitar. I was like, okay, well, I'll do bass. And we had a great drummer, and we did a three-piece called Descent, and it became more of a kind of a death, kind of weird hybrid of a lot of things. We didn't really have a distinct sound or style, but we did record a small demo and played a few shows, and that fell apart.
Were you doing vocals around this time, or was it your guitar player doing the vocals?
Guitar player did some vocals, and I would do other parts, other vocals. So one song he would do that, and we would switch off. That was the kind of thing. It was a little scatterbrained in the direction we wanted to go. I think it probably would have been better, maybe if I had done the vocals, to be honest with you. I mean, he later came back. The guitarist, he later came back and said, "I wish I just let you play guitar, and I wish you did vocals." And I was like, I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I was like, let's just do what, if you want to do it, then I'm a truth, not a truth. I'm a peacekeeper. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to say, well, this is the reason I should be doing this. I'm like, okay, do it. I'll do the bass. Fuck it.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, can we branch upon some of the military stuff? Because I know you were in it, and I don't know much about that specific history in your specific life. So, I mean, when was that decision made? When did you specifically make that decision?
Yeah. So I was still, around 20 years old, maybe 19. I was still living at home, and I was working at a kind of a dead end job, that full-time job at the grocery store. I did not like it. I hated it. And uh, I told my mom, I was like, give me a year to just play in bands and, try to find something and that I like to do. And she's like, okay, I'm going to give you a year. He goes, but at the end of the time, if you're not doing anything with your music, you need to get another job. Cause I was planning to quit this job. And she was planning like, I was just trying to do a little contract with her so she wouldn't charge me rent or all this kind of stuff. So, and she's like, I'll give you a year. If you haven't done anything with your music by that time, though, I need you to get a job. You need to get a job. And I was like, okay, it's a deal. And that was a year of struggle and trying to find the right people, trying to find the motivation because I was heavily driven back then. That was a big goal of mine. I bought new equipment, had a new guitar. Like I can't give you specs on what I had, but it was hell of a lot better than what I was doing before. And I drugged that shit in my little Volkswagen, put the big, 412 back there, put the head, guitar, and I drove hours all over Central Florida playing with different bands, rehearsing or auditioning. And again, they're like, yeah, we'd love you to come play. And then the next practice, like, oh, we're practicing this Saturday, learn these songs. So I learned these songs and I come to practice next Saturday, 2 hours away. And they'd be like, oh, the drummer canceled on us. So we're going to cancel practice for today. And I'm like, and there's no cell phones back then. There were cell phones, but not as prevalent as they are now. So they couldn't call me. And so I was like dejected. These things just piss me off, and I go off and forget it. And the year passed. Nothing was happening. And my mom, so I was going to fulfill my bargain with my mother. And I went off to go get another job, a full-time job. And this was at a rival grocery store. And the rival grocery store, I said, I have these, I was a full-time stock person here. And they're like, okay, you're hired immediately. Come in tomorrow. Oh, in 2 days, and we'll get your paperwork done and get you on the floor. I was like, okay. And I remember being so depressed and defeated,
Yeah.
and I was like, if I do this, I'm going to be stuck here. That's what's going to happen. And I felt no motivation. And I remember it wasn't like recruiters were out to really get me. There was no one recruiting me. But I remember thinking of the possibility, maybe I can join the Navy because that would give me a chance to travel, and get outside and just explore. Even if I can't do music for a long time, at least I can get out and see the world. And something flipped where I was going to pick up the phone to call the Navy recruiter. And right as I picked it up, an Army recruiter was on the phone. He was calling me at the same time I had picked up the phone.
Interesting. What a cool kind of correlation or just the irony of that,
Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was a weird serendipitous kind of moment where I'm a guy who's willing to sign the paperwork to join pretty much at that point, any branch of the military. And it was like 6 o'clock at night. And I was like, yeah, let's talk. He's like, really? I was like, yeah. And that was that eventually led to me joining the Army and going through the hell that was at the beginning.
Now, how long did you join the military for? Because I know you can do like a 2-year or 4-year. And please forgive my ignorance on it, but it's like a 2 or 4-year kind of term. Is that what they call it, or
Yeah,
a
and listen,
6? Yeah, or a 6-year or an 8-year. I think you can only go up to like what 8 years or something, or I don't
yeah, I
know.
think so. Maybe now, I don't know. Yeah, I
But
don't remember the much specific. Yeah.
okay, so maybe let's just say 4 years were you in the military for, or
Yeah, so I enlisted originally for 4 years because I was thinking I was adding on my fingers. I was like, "Well, I'm 21 now." Well, I was 20 when I joined, and, I was like, "I'll be 26 when I get out," because I was gonna sign up for 4 years because there's a big signing bonus. There's like a $10,000 bonus that they just gave you if you signed on, and I was like, "Okay, yeah, I could use the money," and And yeah, so I just agreed to 4 years, and I was just like, I'll still be young when I get out, and so I joined in 95, officially joined in 95 and served 4 years. Well, I served 3 years, and then the option to re-enlist came up, and at that point, I had earned my sergeant stripes, and so I was a leader, officially a leader, and I'd been to these leadership schools and earned a lot of I thrived in the Army, I'm not gonna lie. Not that I liked it that much, but I did very well in it, and so I re-enlisted for a couple more years just to have that leadership under my belt, just to see what it was like to lead from the front instead of follow,
Hmm.
and I would say it was a great experience. It literally pulled me from my safe home space and dropped me in the middle of this trial by fire that, there were points where I was just gonna quit and go home and work that full-time grocery store job and try to get bands, and who knows, I probably could have still been doing that today living in Florida, but I will be thankful for those times I was in the military. I wish I'd maybe taken a different path, like gone to college or something like that, but
Well, but doesn't
yeah.
I mean, the military pays for your college. You could probably still go to, you know, I don't know. I don't,
Yeah,
but
I did go to college briefly after I got out, and, I never
but
completed a degree, so
but you wanted to do the traveling thing. I'm just kind of curious what kind of countries you were traveling around with the military, and did you actually see combat?
no, no, this is the catch-22 that I never saw. The only exotic places I saw were Fort Polk, Louisiana, Fort Hood, Texas, and Fort Irwin, California, and those were the exotic locales I got to visit while I was in the Army, and I was in Texas the entire goddamn time. Those are just places we trained at, so
Did
excuse me,
you? Go ahead.
oh, yeah, and so that was the irony of it, that the only place I got to travel sorry, Fort Benning, Georgia was part of that too, was where I trained. So, I got to visit some of the great states of this United States that we have here, but, and I was there the entire time, yeah.
Interesting, but at least it still counts as travel, though. You got to admit that. So
That's true.
it's
I mean,
not
I don't
like
know if I would have ever gone. I mean, I had family in Georgia, and I passed by Fort Benning, Georgia all the time. I never thought I would be going training there, in my life until I actually was there. Um But, like I said, it was a great experience, and I got to meet a lot of great people, and I met a lot of like-minded people in the military, and, I remember there was a weekend when I was just blasting, and I know this sounds weird to maybe other people, but Cradle of Filth had really just come out, and I was blasting their first album, The Principle of Evil Made Flesh, and this guy comes around, and he's like, "Is that Cradle of Filth?" And I was like, "Get the fuck out of here." And then another great friend I met in the military, we shared ideals, or not ideals, but music, and we talked music all the time. It turned out he played guitar. He did vocals for a death metal band in Ohio, and that's when we started writing music in the military.
oh, that's cool. Did you formulate a band in the military? Is that what you're trying to tell me here?
Yeah, yeah, we formulated one in the military. We actually did a we did a little demo. I did a demo. Now, by this point, I was a little bit more savvy on a 4-track, recorder and not very good at setting up sounds and making sure everything sounds good, but I knew how to record multi-tracks, and so, basically, we were like, "Let's write." We wanted to be a black metal band, and we wanna be like a I'm trying to think, what is Cradle of Filth or Dimmu Borgir
Well, it's like a gothic it's like a gothic black metal band, or it has some industrial symphonic
Yeah,
gothic black
symphonic.
metal,
We
or
wanna put we wanna be like a symphonic kind of death metal band, but not or black metal band, but not use keyboards or anything in our music. We wanted to make riffs that sounded symphonic and majestic, but they weren't controlled by keyboards or anything,
so
or
there'd
they're
be more melodic style based.
yeah, yeah, and, that's what we wrote, and, we would sit together, and I would write the riffs pretty much because he didn't have any gear with him, but I had my gear with me. I brought my shit with me to Texas, because I wasn't gonna give up playing guitar, and so I had my own barracks room, and this is where I would jam out and play, and he would come over, and we'd write songs and
Did you end up
demo them out.
recording? Oh, cool. Yeah, so did you, do anything with these demos? Did you play for the military? Did you,
No, no,
did they set up a
this is
concert
a
for you?
no, yeah, yeah, the military, had no interest in hearing anything that we did like that, but, we never played live, but we did come up with a gimmick. we did record a demo, and the real demo that recorded did come out to years later, probably I think the early 2000s. We were already out of the army, and but we knew we had some cool songs that we wrote in the army, and we still had the demos of those. And they're like, "Let's go into the studio and actually pay someone to record these." And so we do have that out. And the band's name is Fratricide, and we had a kind of looking back, it's kind of a goofy aesthetic, but we put like camo paint on, like the green and black, and we had like names that were associated with military weaponry. Like my name was Coax, is like short for the coaxial machine gun, and his name was Hellfire, Hellfire missiles. And we had a couple of guys who were like that would come in and dabble with us, who played bass, and none of those guys didn't really stick around for too long. But it was just him and I were the core people that made the music and recorded it. And years later, I flew to Ohio at his home, and we booked some time in the studio and just went in and recorded it.
Oh, I love that. But it must have given you, kind of like a way kind of to I don't know, I mean, the military, there's so much stress involved, but this was probably like a nice outlet for you to kind of forget about that specific, at least for an hour or two, and just be
Yeah.
jamming and just kind of a nice little what's the word I'm looking for? A nice little
Reprieve. It's
yeah.
a little reprieve. Yeah, I mean, when you think of the military, you think of like some hardcore shit, but we went out to the field, which we go out and spend a couple of weeks out do training exercises in the woods, or we'd be out in the desert or wherever it would be. It'd be uncomfortable. Sometimes we'd be doing 24, 48-hour shifts where we're up a long time. And but those downtimes, you had your cassette tape player with you, and you pop on whatever you're listening to. It gave you time to actually sit down and maybe write some lyrics, or write down ideas. And he wasn't in the same uh, or company as I was. He was a different company. It's not like we could talk to each other and bounce ideas. But when we come back from our exercises or training exercises, we would like, okay, what do you got? And we just compare notes, and we gelled really well. It was really cool.
I
And
love it.
it kept us both of us a little bit more sane, because we thought we'd have to give up music almost. When we joined the military, we thought, oh, our time's gonna be occupied doing training or all this hardcore shit. And it turned out there's a lot of downtime in the military, and we took full advantage of that.
I
Music.
like it.
Yeah.
So what is the next venture kind of out of the military? When did you specifically kind of move to California?
Yeah. When my enlistment was ending, because they said, oh, you can re-enlist, you could get your next rank easily. They're already lining me up for my next set of sergeant stripes, which is a staff sergeant instead of just a sergeant. And I was like, I think my time here is done. But I had no real aspirations, what I wanted to do afterwards. I could go back home, uh, live with mom, and like I said, just do the same thing there, or I could go somewhere else. And a good friend of mine who was in the military, he lives in California, and he lived near Crestline up here in the mountains. And he's like, well, he just got out in the military like a year before me. And he's like, well, you're welcome to come out here. And I was thinking Southern California. And I remember all the bands that I love from Southern California. And I was like, maybe that's the way to get back into music. And that's what I really wanted to do. Yeah, that's what I really wanted to do. And I was like, there's no way I can do that in Florida. I mean, I guess there probably could have been a way, now that I had more experience. But and there's options. My friend who was in that band Fratricide with me said, "We'll come to Ohio." And I was like, "No, I'm not moving to fucking Ohio." I wanted to be on a major city, or at least in a major metropolitan area, because there's a lot of musicians and a lot of music, and that's the main thing I came out here for. So I came out here, moved out here, and I tried to get jobs with nuclear blast out here, Century Media, and rejected left and right. And I know by now, I know those jobs can only be really attained by who in the business and who works there. But I was so excited. And so money was running low. I was like, well, I guess I got to get a job here in California. So I just happened to look out with what I have. And I've been at the same job since I moved here. uh, working at the software company. And
Wow, that's
yeah.
something that not a lot of people could say. And I just want to add to this too. The weather was probably nicer out here than it was for Florida or Ohio. So you
Oh yeah.
probably made your life, that your decision fairly easy, right?
Yeah. a
Um,
hundred times easy.
so once you get the job and you're kind of situated and whatnot, when do you start kind of finding the guys that you're still kind of playing music with? The Rets or the
Yeah.
Body Bags or the Abominators or where does this whole crowd come into? When does it come into when do they come into your life
Yeah.
per se?
So, like I said, I mean, that was my main thing. My main goal coming out here is it wasn't getting a job. It wasn't for anything else but to get back into music, and it was hard going those first couple of years. I moved out here in November of 2001, and I got the job in February 2002, and then I just started going to remember moshking.com.
Oh, I wish it was still around,
I
dude.
know, I discovered moshking.com because I was just like a random search because Google was still new at the time, and I was like, metal concerts or metal shows in Southern California, and Mosh King was the first thing that come up. It was a blessing in disguise. I wrote down he had like, okay, it's on these dates, these bands are playing. I didn't even know who the bands were. They're local bands, and this band's playing close by. And then I was like, well, maybe I can make this band because they're about an hour away. Fuck it, let's go. And so I'd write a schedule every week. I would go like three times a week to local shows, and it could be like in the Riverside, Inland Empire, or I'd go out to OC, or I'd go to LA, and I wouldn't go too far out there. Like I wouldn't go to San Diego on a weeknight if I had the job. But yeah, and I saw a lot of local bands. I saw bands that I saw David Wayne,
Oh,
his
Metal Church?
solo, yeah, from
Oh,
Metal Church.
you mean Reverend or Wayne
Yeah, Reverend.
itself?
Yeah, yeah, Reverend.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
and he played old metal church tunes. I thought if I had lived in Florida or even Texas, I would have never been able to see David Wayne, rest in peace. And I got to see Ray Alder from Fates Warning. In fact, I saw Ray Alder. He had a band called Engine. He was just getting started up. He did vocals for, and I knew he was playing. It was at Palladino's, and I'm like, I'm gonna go to Palladino's and see his band. And I never heard him, but I love Ray Alder, and I brought my No Exit Fates Warning CD cover, and I saw him
Classic,
there.
dude.
Yeah, and I saw him there, and I was like, Ray, hi Ray. I just want to say I'm a big fan of your music. Always, you got an amazing voice. And he's like, oh, thank you so much. And I was like, can you sign this for me? And he signed it for me, and then he's like, hey, you want to get a beer? And I was like, yeah. And we just chatted, and I was like, this is the most amazing thing in the world. So, yeah, by the time I was really trying to ingrain myself into the scene in Southern California and go to these shows, I had short hair at the time. I'd always wear a cap just so I wouldn't look like such a dweeb to go into these things. But um, so that brings me to almost like a roundabout to Stygian Crown, because we know Melissa uh, is our vocalist. Well, I met Melissa on a heavy metal uh, uh, bulletin board back in like 2002, 2003, and we knew we lived in the same area in San Bernardino, and that's when she's like, oh, Blind Guardian was playing somewhere in LA. Let's go see Blind Guardian. And says, I'll introduce you to my friend Bob. And so that's how I met my good friend Bob Cassing, and then we all kind of synchronized and synergized, and so Bob knew Lily. Lily is Rhett's wife. I say his wife, yeah. And she worked at Wild Rags, so that's how they knew each other. Now, I'd never been to Wild Rags, but I think by that point Wild Rags was done, or it had been closed for a bit. And so I never even knew about Wild Rags. And I met Lily through Bob, and then eventually, as the years progressed, it wasn't too long after that Lily introduced me to Rhett. And now I was listening to Morgion in the 90s when I was in the army. A friend of mine would send me CDRs, and she sent me the CDR of Among Majestic Ruin from Morgion, and I would listen to that all the time. And then Lily's like, oh, this is Red. Do you know that band Morgion? Well, he's the drummer and the founder of the band. I was like, what? You have to do fanboy stuff. I was like, dude, I love that. I fucking listen to that album, that Among Majestic Ruin all the time. And so that's how I knew him. That's how we started connecting. And we would talk about music and playing in bands. And through him, I met, Abominator and Babcock you know, and they eventually got Gravehill going and re-going. Actually, I see doing it again. It had started off with Rhett and some other people in the early in 2001 or 2000. But at the time, I had I was also working in like movie production too, so I wanted to like work in that aspect. So there's some years that passed by that Gravehill was active, and then eventually Rhett would like, "Hey, you want to play bass for Gravehill?" I was like, "No, I don't want to play bass. I got other stuff going on. I can't play bass in a band right now." And then he asked me a couple more times. Eventually, I just acquiesced and said, "Okay, fuck it. What else do I got to do?"
No, when was the decision though to kind of wear all that armor, man? Because like, and now we're going back even. Obviously, you don't really wear the armor now, but back then, I mean, Gravehill around here was kind of known to wear this heavy armor and
Yeah.
the headdress and the fucking blood. And so when did all that start? Did it start immediately when you joined in? Said, hey, you have to wear this shit, or did you kind of just
No, I
instinctually just choose?
I
Okay.
brought that I brought that shit to him. I'm not because at the time I did not look. One of the things Rhett was funny. He's like, "You can join." He says, "We want you to join, but you got to grow your hair." And I was like, "Oh yeah, of course." I kept my hair short for years just because my job, and I don't know. That's a weak excuse. My job doesn't give a fuck if I grow my hair out. But
Well,
at the time,
it's the early, like, 2000s or mid 2000s around this point,
yeah,
so the stigma of long hair wasn't what it, turned into, or,
yeah,
kind of everything's all kinda settled down now,
yeah. Well, and I hadn't had long hair since I was in since 1995, and back, so it's been shaved or cut short ever since then. And so yeah, that was an easy in for me. But I didn't want to be that short haired guy on stage. I didn't want to be Adam, or the old guitarist. He had long hair. Babcock had long hair. Red had long hair. Now Abominator's a different aspect. He's the vocalist. He can do his own thing.
Well,
But
Mikey's bald, though, so it's still
well, that's
metal
what I'm
as fuck,
saying.
so
That's what I'm saying. I didn't wanna be that guy who wasn't bald. It'd been great if I was just bald, but no. So I brought the idea. I was like, "Why don't I just wear, like," at first it was like one of those early slitted, armored helmets that you see on fucking knights and everything, and I was like, "Why don't I just wear one of those on stage?"
like Monty Python status, stab into the fucking eye hole.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because I can at least, say that no one knows what I look like, but at the same time, I can grow my hair out and not have to worry about, the awkward stages of growth. I can keep my head covered up. I can stay out of the limelight, and then when the hair is long enough, I can eventually just take off the helmet, and not use it anymore, which is eventually what happened. But so the first iteration was getting a design for the helmet, and Rhett suggested, "Hey, why not something that's a little more evil?" Or he loved the idea. He just wanted me to go a different direction with it, and I totally agree. He's like, now, you know, but I found a guy who did Renaissance armor online. He did it in Texas, and I gave him a design, and he built the helmet and did what I asked him to, and then he shipped it to me, and I remember popping that motherfucker on and then wondering how the fuck I was gonna play bass because I couldn't see anything. So these are all little things that came into play. And
Well, how did you, kind of work around that specific aspect, and how heavy was the headgear to kind of wear on stage? Because if you're moving around on that stage and you're wearing something heavy on your head,
yeah.
it ain't gonna be fun. Plus all the ringing from the noise inside that metal
Yeah.
fucking
Well,
thing.
the good thing
So
was it was made of leather, so there's no really metal, pieces to it except for the spikes, the dragon spikes. And I had him specifically make a chin strap for me because I knew it would just wobble on my head, and so that I had to make sure that chin strap was on tight. But the big thing about it was just awkward. The horn stuck out like almost 2 feet, from the side, like I was a longhorn steer or something. So if I'm walking through the backstage area, I remember when we played with Watain and getting caught up in the curtain to get up on the stage in the knitting factory. Yeah, and curtain caught the helmet and pulled my head straight to the side, and then I had to fight with it to get on stage, and it was a total Monty Python. It was a total goddamn
Fucking Spinal Tap moment,
Spinal Tap
dude.
moment, and it was hilarious. It wasn't hilarious at the time. I was pissed, but and then the challenge of playing with it on, because I never played an instrument with anything obscuring my face. Now I did play it with it in practice. Like, I would sit at home with it on, and I'd go to practice when we practice, and I look ridiculous in practice with the helmet on, but the guys knew it was for a reason. They didn't bust my balls too much about it, but yeah, and it just became, one of those feel kind of things that I did have some trouble during that Watain show, because that was the first show I played with them, and they suddenly turned the lights red, and I couldn't see my fret markers. So it was just like a matter of just like I'd bang my head with the helmet on, and every time I looked down, I was like, "Oh, that's the third fret. Okay, that's where we need it. Oh, here's the fourth."
That's funny. The headbanging helped you fucking just tear into kind of knew what your place on the fretboard. That's funny.
Yeah, yeah. It was a chore. I eventually got armor for it.
Well, you all did, if I'm not mistaken. I think the whole band started to like work around that specific helmet, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. So it kind of have like a kind of an aesthetic about us that we're
theme, or like like what Kiss is, or like
yeah.
Now when was I kind of want to know your first kind of studio album with them, the Rights of the Pentagram release, and this was, I think, one of the first things you did with them. So if you can walk me through just the whole process of recording your first ever album in your career.
Yeah, the first ever professional album I'd ever recorded. Yeah, it was by that time, when I came into the band, most of Rights of the Pentagram had already been written. Of course, I knew the demo. I loved the demo, and I would go to see Gravehill all the time, actually, whenever they played, and I would film them on video camera, and we'd hang out and drink, and because we're in the end, we're really good friends in the first place. So Rights of the Pentagram, they would send me demos of it, and it's like, we're gonna play this for the show, just learn this song, and we'll jam it, in rehearsal, but learn what you can, and then we'll, adjust from there. And excuse me. And we played those songs live enough, and then we practiced them enough that when we did go into the studio to finally record what we needed to do, it was really kind of easy, to be honest, that I wasn't nervous about it. The only thing that made me nervous was sometimes Rhett would come in and he would just stand there and watch. And I know he wasn't trying to be intimidating. I know he was there for purely support and everything, but I just wanted to be there with the engineer. And if the engineer heard anything, they could say this. But Rhett was there, and eventually he would just he's like, "Hey, why don't you add a note here? Or why don't you do this little trick here?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's a good idea." And so eventually became really comfortable.
So it turned into a comfort thing, but at first, maybe because of his prior history and you being a fan, that probably played some role in it. And by gosh, I mean, he's like 8 foot tall and just fucking. I mean,
he's very imposing. Yes.
I mean, he would definitely be intimidating, especially if you were a fan of his particular earlier work and kind of wanted to impress him. I mean, this is your first fucking album with him,
right?
So it's like, oh fuck,
Yeah.
But eventually that's cool. So it turned into this kind of, I don't know, this kind of killer kind of relationship. Of like, oh yeah, that would work, or you kind of bouncing off ideas off each other. Because I'm assuming Rhett's the kind of guy where he's kind of open to a conversation rather than being like, oh no, do this instead only.
Yeah. Now I make no mistakes that I know that Rhett will be the last say in anything. But most of the music that we've recorded over the years, it has been a group effort and a collaboration. And there have been times when Rhett has literally said, "Fuck that riff. That's a horrible riff. Don't play that riff ever again," and we're like, okay. And it doesn't hurt our feelings. It's just like, maybe he's right. It's like, because he is like the main figure. So, but most of this stuff is, he's like, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that, and then we play off that. So it's worked really well over the years.
I love it. And you worked with John Haddad, obviously, on this specific release, if I'm not mistaken. Now, what is the initial feedback from this? Did you guys start to do a lot of touring for it, or was there any label support, or?
Yeah, we originally got on a label called Enucleation that put out the original Rights of the Pentagram album. Didn't have any extras on it. It was just those straight songs, and that was it. It's still hazy, kind of looking back. That we did have shows, we did play shows. We played several small fests throughout the country. No extensive real touring. That didn't come until a little bit later. Excuse me. But Enucleation kind of went under a little bit, and we were about to. I'm not sure the reason, but I think Rhett wanted a better label to put out Rights of the Pentagram, and so we hit up John McKenty from Incantation, and he has I don't know if he still has it, but the Ibex Moon Records, and John, and I think John and Mike and Rhett had a relationship already. I'm not sure what the extent of that relationship was. But they knew each other. They had talked to each other, and John didn't have any qualms whatsoever. We went out and played either New Jersey or we were in some state, and John came out. He brought some contractual paperwork with him, and we signed it. And he re-released Rights of the Pentagram, but also included the Avocation of Murder EP with that. So it was a nice little bundle of the first kind of full section of Gravehill songs that came out during that time. And we did a little touring around it. And like I said, I'm trying to think because we've done extensive touring several times. And
But I think around this time, if I remember correctly, there wasn't much touring, right? I mean, it wasn't kind of until I want to say like almost after Matt Harvey joined, like
Yeah.
maybe like when I could be wrong, but like with the when Witch Haven kind of filled in, I remember you did extensive touring then. So I'm not,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if you did it for what Rights of the Pentagram or not. So
No, you got you're stirring you got my memory going. Yeah, you're right. We didn't tour that much during Rights. We did, like I said, we did play a couple of one-off fests here and there. We played a fest in New Jersey. I think we did something in Chicago. So and stuff around here, maybe up in San Francisco. Yeah, it wasn't until we started into When All Roads Lead to Hell, the next album, that I wouldn't say things kicked off per se, but yeah. Oh yeah. Nice. You got it framed and everything. It's awesome.
you have to, dude. But can we go back just a little bit after, you signed the deal to Ibex Moon, they re-released all that stuff. I'm assuming this was probably a better situation for you guys specifically. And it probably gained more traction to that specific album itself. But what was the next step after all of that took place? When did Harvey kind of step in?
Yeah, so we were around that time we were having trouble with Adam. Now, I'm not going to spew any personal shit or anything, but Adam and Rhett had issues with each other, and eventually we're going to play a fest. I remember we're going to either play a fest, or we're going to play a show, and Adam was agreeing. He's like, "Well, look, things aren't working out, but I'll play this show, so I won't leave you guys in the dust." Because it was only like a couple of weeks, and something happened between Rhett and him, and it exploded, and then Adam left, and fired, quit, take your
Whatever the
pick,
situation, yeah,
depending on who
whatever
you
the
talk to.
situation
So it left us in a lurch. We couldn't do whatever show we were doing, or if we did it, we only did it as a 4-piece. But we're
Well, why
still
is that?
writing.
Well, why is that? Because I know Mike plays guitar, so why couldn't he have play guitar for that specific show?
Yeah, I don't know I don't know the specific reason. I know when
Okay.
I joined the band that he was playing bass at the same time. He was doing vocals and playing bass. And I know he said at the time specifically he did not want to do that anymore. He wanted to just do vocals.
Okay.
And I don't think he really wanted to do it at that time, So
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
I'm just curious. So, so what you guys kind of, I guess in talking with Matt Harvey, he kind of explained, his side of the story where he kind of like got a call from Red or something like that. And after he kind of moved back from Hawaii and,
Mhm.
but what is your specific recollection of that whole kind of situation?
Yeah, we were in the middle of we were writing Roads, and we were actively searching for a guitarist, and I think we had hit up several people to come rehearse. Some didn't show up, some just weren't the right fit. Not that they were bad people or bad players, it was just didn't gel. And then Rhett was like, "Well, I can maybe try Matt Harvey, because he's just moved in. And I was like, exhumed Matt Harvey? And he's like, yeah. I was like, fuck, I wasn't expecting him anything of it. I was like, Matt's not going to do it. Why would he do it? But I didn't know Matt at the time. And so when Matt agreed to do it, I was thrilled. I was like, fuck, dude. Okay. Another guitar hero of mine, I'm going to play with him, play alongside him. And that was really exhilarating to see him play and come in. And he came in, once he came in, I remember being introduced to him. It was at Rhett and Lily's old condo. And I think Matt was just going to stay with him for a few days while he came and jammed with us. And I think that night we all just kind of sat around and drank beer and listened to music and really got to know each other. And just after a while, he was like, oh, yeah, Harvs, he's just a normal guy like you and me. But an extremely talented person as well. So this is where I started thinking, I was like, wow, I'm really playing below my pay grade now, because I always thought of myself as kind of an average player. But when I've been playing with Matt and Rhett and even Babcock, I say even Babcock, but he's an extremely talented guitarist. And I felt, boy, they sure could do with a better bassist than me.
Well, I think your personality probably makes up for it, man, because
Yeah.
and you sure as shit know this, dude. You'd much rather have in the band, a good guitar player, but with a great personality than just, a bad personality but a great guitar player.
Yeah. But you just start doubting yourself. It's like, fuck, if he gets a
But
Harvey, and
but he also makes you a better player. So it's kind of
well,
good to have that balance of talent, because it only brings the rest of you guys up. You know what I
no, it
mean?
is, and it really challenged me with the riffs he was bringing to the table for Rhodes. That some things got a little more complex than the previous releases. And as we're writing those, Harvey would bring songs to the table, like fully written songs. And but Rhett pushed back a little bit on that. He didn't. I think one of the fully written songs that Harvey did bring, we tweaked it. We wanted to cut this part out or shorten this part or something like that. I don't know if Harvey really cared for that too much, but I know it was fun playing and writing music with him though. And yeah.
Sure. And recording it, you guys kind of went through the same process. I think you went to Hadad again. Um, for the recording, you probably guys were just comfortable going there, and it was just a good working environment. But can you walk me through just the cover itself and your choice of, or your reasons for the choice for choosing the painting per se?
Oh yeah. Yeah, the painting. Because we're like we love Riddick's work on the previous album. And now I'm not sure why we couldn't get Riddick. Oh, you know what? It's because I don't think we're on Ibex Moon anymore, or we weren't signed for anything else that John couldn't support directly. So any album art we would do would have to come straight out of our pockets. And I think that's a story. Now, someone may, Rhett, or if anyone listens to this may come and correct me, but so I don't know if I suggested or Mikey suggested that why don't we just get one of those old Renaissance paintings of hell or something like that, and just kind of have someone just kind of like recolor it a little bit. And Mike Fisher, I don't know if you know Mike Fisher, is a great graphic designer in LA. He's done a lot of our stuff, actually, layouts and stuff for albums. But he went in and recolored the artwork. And basically it's just one of those things that it didn't cost anything for us to use other than just to have the graphic designer pump some colors up. Is
And
a
and there's
decision.
probably it's probably like a classical thing where like there's no copyrights to it or anything of that
Right.
nature, right? Which is why a lot of people kind of use, like, even Bathory used, kind of old paintings and
Right, yeah, and that was the idea. It's like we knew we wouldn't get gig for copyrights or anything like that. I think most of it was a financial decision, but after we found that picture, we're like, "Oh, this is kind of fucking rad." This is a good decision. So, we had that, drawn up. Well, not drawn up, but, you know, laid out. We're like, "Okay."
sure. And so the record gets released. I think you guys, I want to say you signed with Dark Descent around this time. I
Yeah.
want to say that, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, so there is a little point there where John we were still on Ibex Moon when we were recording, uh, Rhodes. Um Yeah, I'm trying to think when we recorded and where we toured, because we did a big tour with Cardiac Arrest, Hod, and Gravehill. At that time, Ibex Moon was supposed to provide financial support for it. John couldn't do it, but we had already booked these dates. It was close to 2 weeks before we were supposed to head out, and since John couldn't support it, I said, "Fuck it, let's put it on my credit card." So all those expenses on Gravehill's uh, budget was put on my credit card. And I think that started our exit from Ibex Moon, because I don't think at the time, I don't know if what John's was doing with Ibex Moon. There's some things happening I don't know. So that's when we started actively looking for another label. And I think during that transition, during that tour, and during the recording, that's when Abominator, I think Abominator or Rhett had a connection with Matt from Dark Descent, and Matt was like, "Yeah, fuck it, I'll do it." So
And Matt typically doesn't kind of sign bands of your kind of stature. Whereas I always thought he was kind of the more like grindy bands around that specific time era, and I could be wrong, but I know like
yeah,
traditional death metal bands he wasn't signing around this specific time.
yeah. He was. I didn't say he was doing some grind stuff, but I think he was doing a lot of the war metal was pretty popular during that time too. So a lot of the bands he was putting out were in that kind of same genre or vein.
What is war metal?
Uh, I guess you could say Blasphemy is probably like the pinnacle or the originators of it. Just pretty much a lot of reverb, a
Bolt
lot of
thrower? Is that
Bolt
considered
Thrower. No. That's
okay.
that's definitely
W-
death metal. Yeah.
Okay.
But if you think of over reverbed vocals where you can't hear anything, just warble screams, it's very akin to black metal, but it's a little even more rougher than that. Um, if that can even be done. Extra slow, low tune guitars with a lot of reverb on it that you can barely make out any riffs.
Sounds like a Ruin record.
Even Rule clearer than some of these bands.
So but anyway, so he signs you guys, so you do the tour and whatnot. Now, what kind of transpires on this tour? Do you guys start to gel a little bit more, or was there some kind of friction around this time period, or what was kind of happening in the Gravehill camp?
Yeah, so this is a time that Mikey had stopped drinking. He was not drinking, so he didn't drink this entire tour. So I think that was grating on him a little bit. But there are some things that he would get pissed off about, and I'm not just saying him. We would all get pissed off about some certain thing or other. It was very stressful, especially realizing how the load-ins and how the loadouts were going, how slow they were going, the lack of space that we had. We had like 2 vehicles, and people crammed in a van and people crammed into an SUV, and with an overloaded trailer that could barely hold. It was bulging with equipment. So there'd be times when we would finish shows like, "Oh, we gotta load out and get everything into the van and get out of here and be on the road in an hour to make another show in 6 hours or 14 hours or something," whatever
Oh
was
my
down next on
gosh.
the list. And then how it is when you go out and play a show and people drink and they're in party mode, and suddenly you find that there's only 2 people loading the van, and that was a big issue for me, and I was pissed because I was the one loading the damn van or loading. It was me, Rhett, um, Mike too, Mike as well. Harv and Babcock would be gone 3 sheets to the wind, wherever the fuck they were at, and that's after a while you get used to it. You get used to people the way they work, and in the first few days I was pissed, but after a while you kind of learn to live with it and adjust and be flexible, and then you're not pissed, and then you're drinking with them, and then you're out there loading gear drunk and hoping you're putting things in right. um, but yeah, it was a total DIY tour. By the time we hit Austin and Texas, Hod dropped off at that time. They were planning to bring the big point of that was like they were going to bring someone else into their van to help drive, but there's literally no more room. I mean, unless someone just lied across someone's lap, and and we
It's
thought
gotta be miserable,
it'd be
dude. That
miserable.
sounds
And
sounds miserable to me, dude.
yeah, so they they
Um,
they dropped off unfortunately during that part, but
Now, so Harvey kind of leaves. And restarts, Exhumed and whatnot. He's doing his own thing and whatnot. But when was the transition of of Henry and essentially Eric kind of filling in for
Yeah.
Gravehill.
So during that tour, Harv was writing new material for All Guts, No Glory. He was coming up with the material, and he would just sit on his notebook while driving. So we knew he was going to do that. At the time, he was still part time with Gravehill. So if we played a show out or something, that he would be available to take on the guitar work. And eventually, he recruited Babcock to go play bass and do vocals with Exhumed, and so that took effectively our two guitarists out. So if we wanted to play any just a short West Coast tour, we'd either have to ask Babcock or Harvey if their schedules could accommodate, or we'd have to find different musicians to sit in. And that's when I think Rhett, we all had the idea. It's like, well, wait a minute, Henry and Eric, we were great friends with Witchhaven, and they're great guitarists, and let's just hit them up, because we're just doing Impiety, couple of shows, couple of dates, and of course, Eric and Henry are absolutely the coolest, laid back people in the world. They're like, yeah, fuck it, let's do it. And so it just came on, learned the songs, and it didn't take them long. I mean, they pretty much knew most of the material anyways, because they're familiar with Gravehill. And yeah, we just took off and did those dates with Impiety.
Now, why didn't they join kind of full time? Just because you wanted to have kind of your own kind of set of people, and because Witchhaven was kind of just, wanted to let them do their own thing. And
yeah, I think Witchhaven was really busy at that time, and I know Henry wanted to concentrate. I know he definitely wanted to concentrate. I know he didn't mind filling in, or maybe even he wanted, if we asked him to do Gravehill part time, I know he and Eric would probably be down. So I think it was tossed around whether we should take them on full time or ask them to come on full time. And I think we were just like, well, they got Witchhaven, they're going to be really busy. That we'd rather find some musicians who would kind of give Gravehill their full, because we love
dedication.
Harvey. We love Harvey. We love Babcock, and they played a couple of shows with Gravehill at fests, and these are without practice for months. The Exhumed would be on the road, and then we'd meet up at a fest that Exhumed would be on, and then they come out and play with us, and it would go off great. It's not like they wouldn't miss a beat, but at the same time, if we want to do something more, those guys had their own agenda and schedule. So we wanted to get guitarists that could devote their entire, not their entire being, like they have to sell your soul to Gravehill, but you want to be here, you want to play it and take on the full aesthetic of it.
Right. Well, it's a matter of I would say dedication. You need people you need dedicated people that are going to just do the job and be there when you need them. This, to help support Gravehill, I should say. Right. Now let's talk about when Nelson and Chris kind of join the fold. Did you start to notice them around the Cobra Venom days, or did you see the band around and said those guys seem like pretty cool guys? Let's see if they want to join, or how did they?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I didn't know who Nelson or Chris were. I think either, again, Rhett or Mikey most likely probably had the idea. I don't want to sell Rhett out or anything, but Mikey is obviously very ingrained in the underground, and he knows a lot of bands and a lot of people. And he threw out Cobra Venom and asked if I had ever heard them. I was like, no, I don't know who they are. And he said, well, there's these two guitars. Well, one's a bass player, the other's a guitarist, but I know the other guy plays guitar. And so we can ask him. And I don't know what spawned Mikey thinking of them in the first place, but when he brought it to us, we're like, yeah, if they want to come and do it, that'd be great. And then I think Mikey or Rhett asked them, and yeah, Chris and Nelson were just like full on, yes, we are into it, the blood, whatever, the spikes, and let's fucking do it. And I was like, holy shit. And then and when they get in the band, it's just like, there's this level of professionalism that between both of them that was astounding. Not that Harvey wasn't professional, or Babcock, or even Adam, but there's a work ethic about them that was really, they were in Gravehill, and just hearing Chris play his solo, play those solos and imitate the solos that Babcock did and Adam did on Rights of the Pentagram and just play them note for note. And I was like, that's amazing. How did they do that?
Well, did you know that he recorded and whatnot too? Because he brought that specific element to the Gravehill camp as well. Now you had this freedom of, that you had an in-house person that kind of knew his shit when it came to recording.
Yeah, yeah. It's not only uh, Chris brought that recording aspect to it, but Nelson also had this amazing knowledge of guitars and how to work on guitars, and they both had contacts, to get great deals. And it was like it's this great boon for Grayville. It's like, and then we weren't pulling them in for those specific aspects. We pulled them in because they're amazing musicians, but this was just cherries on top of ice cream, and that they brought in this extra stuff, and that was very nice. And like I said, I when we started recording Death
Death
Curse,
Curse.
yeah, that we only went and recorded at John Haddad's the drums for that one, and we did all the rest of the stuff through Chris's studio setup
And
in
I
our
think you
jam
guys
room.
did. Yeah, I was gonna say I think you did it at like Vernon Studios, if I'm
That's
not
right. You
mistaken.
you and a couple other people came down and did some backing up gang vocals. I remember now.
Yeah, yeah, I remember stealing the show or something like that, or like, like I was getting so much shit for.
Oh, maybe your vocals. I can't
Yeah,
remember
it was funny.
specifics of what went on, but it's
I
yeah,
just remember like just we all just had like a good vibe around that place, kind of
yeah,
just all of a sudden said, "No, you fucking up, do it again," and it was just like, "Oh fuck." So, but it was a that was a fun time, man. That was like
yeah,
good experience. But I remember I hadn't heard the record. We just kind of came in, and then when I heard some of the riffs and one, I'm like, oh, might be like my favorite Gravehill album so
yeah,
far, right? It's just the guitar tone is a huge kind of huge improvement, I would say, for you
yeah.
guys around, especially around this kind of time period and whatnot. And I'm just kind of curious, did you just guys just kind of sit around the rehearsal, and that's how, there was kind of no pressure to do it. So I'm assuming you guys, I don't know, worked around your schedules, got into that rehearsal, and then just kinda cranked it out.
Yeah, and the crafting of the songs, again, it was a collaborative effort. I would bring stuff to the table, Chris would bring stuff, Nelson, even Mike. I say even Mike. Why do I keep saying even Mike? Mike is a talented man who knows how to play bass and guitar, and he would bring riffs, and Mike would bring his acoustic guitar. He's like, "I got this riff," and he'd bang out this riff on his acoustic guitar, and then we'd play it. Chris would crank up the distortion on his guitar and just play that riff, and a lot of that stuff was gelled and ingrained, and uh, it worked really well, and it wasn't hard to write that record. Like it felt like What All Roads. It was kind of a tough go for some of it. But Death Curse, it was very easy. Like I said, Nelson and Chris were true professionals, and they were like at Rhett at the time too, where if they didn't like a riff, they tell each other. Nelson would be like, "No, fuck that. I don't want you to do that. I'm not doing that." And then we like, okay, well, let's compromise on something else. And then Chris would be the same way. It's like, no, don't play that trash riff. That's not how you play it, or something. And it'd be like a busting of balls. It wouldn't be completely serious, but it was great to see honesty, and it's where you didn't settle for a riff that was,
What, like,
average.
you weren't married to the riff. Does that make
Right.
sense? That's
Yeah.
what I Yeah, so but that's the same vibe that I got just even doing coming in and doing some background vocals. It was like, "Oh, like, we're busting each other's balls here, but it's still fun." It's still
Yeah.
like, it's not we're not taking this thing seriously. We're just playing dirty fucking death metal.
Dirty death metal. Exactly. I love that term.
Right? So, um, but so it kind of so the record kind of, comes out. I think you did some more touring for this and whatnot, and then Mike kind of decides that he is wanting to do something different, and kind of does his own thing with Ruin, and brings back Gasp, and is now with Vrenth and whatnot. So
Yeah.
obviously you guys are still tight. I mean, there's still ebb and flows of Gravehill mixed with Mike Abominator still, but
Right.
can you walk me through that specific period, the 2014 and 2015, and you
Yeah.
transitioning into the vocal duties?
Yeah, that was rough. Mikey has been a staple for so long that, I remember him first approaching me about his, not dissatisfaction with the band, but he felt like he was maybe artistically not going any further. And uh, I understood that to a point, but he's been in bands for years and he's played music for years. And, when he's done with something, he'll go on to something else and he'll keep collaborating and playing. And I saw the writing on the wall when he was like that. And it made me sad, but I was like, well, it also was like, okay, well, maybe this is like another chapter that closes on Gravehill and then we'll open something up, with a new vocalist or a new style or whatever we need to do to adjust and be flexible. So yeah, it was really rough, and uh, we all of us did not want to see him go, but at the same time, we didn't guilt him and say, "Oh, you can't do this. You'll never go anyway." It's just like, no, we know you're going to be successful after this, and we'll always be friends. And it was totally a mutual thing. And I still miss the guy and going to band practices and him busting our chops about one thing or another or yelling at us. But yeah, it was a tough time. And then not long after that, Chris followed him. Chris
Well,
was
Chris like had like a kid or something around this time too. Like that was, if I'm not mistaken, that was like that whole era.
there might be, I'm not sure when he exactly had his child, but I know he had plans to move up north, back up to Fremont and that area up north near the Bay Area, if not exactly the Bay Area. And that was his plan, and he pursued that, and we're like, fuck, okay, yeah. So we asked Nelson, uh I think it said, well, Chris is leaving. This doesn't mean you have to leave though. If you want to leave, we'll understand. And Nelson was like, no, I'm fucking in it. So let's go. Let's just, if it's just the three of us, it's just the three of us. And we can find a new vocalist, we can find a new guitar player, it's fine. And that's how it settled on the three core of us members being there.
Sure. And then obviously I know we touched upon it during our last specific interview, but I would like to touch upon it again just to solidify it and have it into one cohesive package, one cohesive episode. But can you tell me when you specifically kind of stepped up to the microphone for the first time and decided to be the vocalist essentially of Gravehill?
Yeah, yeah. I was Rhett asked me out of the not. I mean, I know he'd probably been you know, thinking about it for a while, and I know he's probably talked with Nelson because I don't think anything we all three do, we don't do without each other's kind of approval, or at least we let each other know. And so I think they kind of both came to me and asked if, do you want to do vocals? We always did backup vocals, and I guess I could do it, and if you wanted to play bass at the same time and do vocals. And I was like, yeah, yeah, let's give it a try. If it doesn't work out, then I'll stay on bass and we can find another vocalist. And yeah, and that was a rough transition. I was, when I was telling you San Diego, and that being a vocalist is a totally different animal than being a bass player. It's a totally different animal from being a guitar player. And I wasn't used to that. I wasn't used to being up at the forefront. I wasn't used to projecting my voice. I wasn't used to using my voice as an instrument. And so all these things I had to learn anew.
Well, so now that I've kind of heard the beginnings of your story and whatnot, I would almost kind of argue with that because obviously you were doing stuff during the demo days, so you had some prior kind of
Yeah.
inner, some prior knowledge of what what took to be a vocalist. I would almost argue the point to kind of add to your point, whereas you probably didn't know what it was like to do it full time, and that's completely
Yeah.
different.
No, I
Just,
think
go ahead.
no, that's perfection. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Doing it full time was another beast altogether. And that was a time that well, I was going to try to emulate what Abominator was doing. I was like, I didn't want to stray too far from his path. I was like, if I strayed too far, then people would judge it, but if I didn't stray too far, they'd be like, okay, well, the new vocalist, he sounds like Abominator, and we can kind of coalesce and adjust. And that's what I originally did when we went into this first practices, was try to emulate Abominator as much as I could. But it made me uncomfortable. I didn't feel like I was finding my rhythm. I wasn't finding my specific, because I was trying to mimic and trying to do the things that he did. And I eventually I even told Rhett that I said, "I don't think I can do it, man. I really don't think I can do it. I'll just go in and play bass, and you find." And I even suggested Babcock to come back in. I was like, Have Babcock come back in and play guitar, and he can do vocals, and I'll just stay on bass." I was trying to find an easy way out, and Rhett said, "No, no." He goes, "I want you to do vocals. You just get more confidence, to practice." And it's like, we'll continue to practice. And Nelson and I may bust your balls. We may tell you, you're doing this wrong, your rhythm's wrong. And there are times when my rhythm was fucking off. I don't know, all those old songs, the D beat songs that Abominator did, I wasn't used to. And so these weird time, they weren't, when you listen to them, they're not weird time signatures, but when you're trying to sing to them, suddenly shit becomes this collection of mathematical problems, and suddenly I'm seeing numbers all around me like I'm Rain Man.
Well, I think singing on an upbeat always messes me up, right? Because I'm always playing on the down, so it's
Yeah.
like
So it's all these upbeats, especially in Rights and the demo stuff, it was like very hard for me to adjust. And eventually I had to come to the realization I had to get my own voice and do what comes to me. And once I started finding that natural voice and coming into practice, and then, getting thumbs up from Rhett and Nelson saying, "Okay, you're nailing it. You're nailing it." And I'm like, oh, "Okay, fuck." I felt the tension and the anxiety kind of, fade away a bit. I mean, there's still tension and anxiety there, but it's not as big as it was because suddenly I'm understanding things. And, you
well,
know,
you're also more comfortable within yourself, and that
yeah,
takes a little bit of almost getting used to, man.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, for sure, man. It was coming to terms with my own limitations, and then how I can improve upon those, which I did. I went to a vocal coach one time, and then I watched a bunch of YouTube videos on vocal coaches, and then I did my research, and then I practiced, and I was like, "Okay, I need to do it like this. I need to do it like this." And yeah.
Can I ask you this though? And where I'm going with this is, do you kind of put aside, like, almost like, not like, just it's kind of make believe that the three albums didn't exist before you got there, but so you didn't like compare yourself to Abominator? Did that help you in finding your own voice for Gravehill, and just pretend that it was like this is its own thing?
Yeah, once I started doing that, I literally started doing that because before when I started singing, again, I was trying to emulate, I was trying to imitate. And then once gave up that, and I was like, "Okay, that I have to remember that what he did is another iteration of Gravehill. This is something brand new that's getting restarted, and I need to come into my own." And just like the military and going to basic training, it was a trial by fire. You either do it or you fucking quit. And I had to do it because I wasn't going out like that, man. I was like,
Well,
"I'm just gonna quit. I'm not even gonna play music anymore. I'm just gonna go sit in my s- dark
but
room and play video games."
I think the brilliant thing that you guys did though was, yeah, you did a split, I think, with Necrofilth. It had a couple songs on it, so it was probably easier for you to transition yourself within the vocals and say, "Here's a little taste of what New Gravehill is gonna sound like." So you're not doing a full-fledged record at first, you
Oh,
know.
actually, that Necrofilth was still had Mikey on vocals.
Oh, did it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So though we did a split with more. Oh my god, a Swedish band. Um, it was a Skull Splitter EP that we did. Why can't I know? I want to say Morbicida, but that's not who it is. They're not a Swedish band. Skull Splitter. Anyways, we did this split with these guys from Sweden, and I'm really proud of those vocals on that EP. I mean, I love playing those songs. Those songs were really strong. They're really catchy, at least to me. And when we play them out live, it was just like it's like when we played those songs out live for the first time, it felt like I was actually playing my music, or these are my songs. These are the ones I sang. And of course, I was still doing the old stuff too, but the new stuff I was like obviously more comfortable with. So
Right. Oh, so yeah, my apologies for it. I think
oh
I
no,
think I was trying to think of the Skullbearer EP. So I was trying to think of the EP itself. But my point in all this is you kind of just like dipped your toes in, and was that's because if you go full fledged into it, and it's like it's a little bit, you didn't bite off more than you can chew, kind of thing is, I guess,
Yeah,
what I'm getting at. So I just think it was a very smart move on your specific part,
yeah,
because if you fuck up an EP, it's just an EP,
it's
or
just an
or
EP.
or or a split. It's not, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah,
like, but in doing that, it helped you obviously to record the Unchaste, the Profane, and the Wicked LP that came out a couple years after that. So, can you walk me through that whole experience for you and stepping in the studio as the vocalist for a full length record for the first time?
yeah. I wasn't expecting too much different of the process that we did with a Skull Bear. The only difference was was that the songs took a lot more time to write. There's consistent collaboration. At the time, LD was in the band, and Bob Babcock was back playing bass. Um, so it was a collaboration of them, of Nelson going back and forth with these riffs, and LD learning them, and LD would come out from Utah because that's where he was based at the time, and practice with us, and then write music, and we go out to Utah as well to practice and write with him there. But it was a long process where we just had to like cut some stuff, and uh, yeah, and so when we finally got in the studio, not everything was complete. There are some riffs that hadn't been written. There are some songs that still need to be rearranged. Lyrics hadn't been written for 2 songs. So I was in the studio writing lyrics as I was listening to demo tracks on my headphones. And so I was
Stressful.
writing lyrics. Yeah. Yeah, it was just like the Plague Hammer song that we have. Those were all written out. I remember the guys had done a demo. I was at work, and they sent the demo to me through my Google Drive, and I just put my headphones on at work, pulled up a notepad, and just started typing lyrics as the music was playing, and just getting that stuff done. And yeah, it was became hectic, but getting in there and actually doing it. There's some parts, I would do something kind of layered. I would do something that would go fast, and then John Haddad, who's a great engineer, he would like, okay, let's take a step back and re-record this part because it sounds like you were hesitant, or something like. So he paid attention to me. Rhett was there too, and we got it out. It wasn't that painful of a process to record the vocals. Again, I wasn't too nervous. I was anxious just because I wanted to get in there and get it done. But I think at that point we had played the songs enough, and I had done vocals in practice, and except for maybe those 2 songs I hadn't really hammered out live or done as long, but once the recording started and I started singing those lyrics, it just meshed, and, there's no problem on anybody's I mean, Rhett was like, you know, "Get that thumbs up from Rhett, I'm fucking good, dude."
Right.
Put
Well,
us
yeah, and the record obviously came out really killer. It was released again on Dark Descent, so you guys have a killer working relationship with that specific label, and obviously the label's grown, which
Oh,
means the
yeah.
band's gonna grow, obviously with it. Now, what is the initial reaction from the fans for this specific full length? Because some on a lot of them, this is probably some of the you're getting new fans because of the label growing in popularity as
Yeah.
well. So I'm assuming there was this kind of you had side fans on one side who was like, oh, this is really cool, this is something different, and this is the first time I'm hearing it. And then you also had fans that were kind of older and said they're kind of comparing it to Mike Abominator years and
Yeah.
saying, what the fuck is this? So I'm assuming
Yeah.
you had both of those the sides of the coin there.
Yeah, yeah, there's both sides of the coin. I can't tell you, I don't have any metrics on if
Right, what
people
I was just
enjoyed me better than Abominator, but yeah, I would see the comments that would roll in. It's not the same. It's not the same without Mike. I'm not listening to Gravehill anymore. Or, if I go to see a show, I'm only gonna, I hope they just play old stuff, kind of things like that. And then there was new fans that would come in and like us. There was even there are times that I would see comments from people that said, I wasn't a fan of Gravehill until I heard this album. And that made me feel a lot better. I was like, okay, I know I shouldn't be, so soft hearted. We all have to have a thick skin being in the music business, but being that this is my first LP on vocals from such an iconic person, taken over from such an iconic person in the scene, at least, and that I need a little validation. I don't mind getting ragged on and everything, but as long as some people like it, I'm like, okay, it was worth it, so yeah, I saw it kick back and forth, and yeah, it doesn't bother me, especially now, years later.
Oh,
So
sure, sure. I was just
yeah.
saying for that specific time period, it must, you must have had quite the amount of support from either side of the party, or
Yeah.
so. But around this specific time too, you guys started Stygian Crown. Again, can you walk me through the reasons for starting this specific project, just so I can get it documented into, again, one cohesive package to
Yeah.
your specific episode?
Yeah, so Stygian Crown was, it wasn't even Stygian Crown, we had no name for it. It started around 2016, I think. Rhett wanted to do a Doom project. He wanted to do, I don't know if he wanted to do something similar to Morgion or King of the Crow, which was another one of his bands, or something different. And so there's all these ideas that we threw back and forth at each other. And he asked Nelson and I to participate. There's another guy we brought on as guitarist, Mike Davis, and we started writing songs slowly but surely in that vein. They kind of petered off a little bit, uh, where it was going into another direction musically, and uh, there's sometimes I couldn't really devote to it. So they asked me if they could get another bass player to play, to continue on, and I was like, "Have at it! It'll free me up to do, not stress out the other things that were going on in my life." And so they went on with another bass player at the time, and they were recording and doing some things, or not recording, but writing. And then a couple of years later, I get asked to come back, to, "Hey, you want to come back and play bass again? I think we definitely have a style that we want to go after now." And uh, we originally had the guitarist, Alejandro Corregidor. He
Oh,
did a
yeah, from Nausea
from yeah,
and, Pounder and,
yeah.
he's all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, he has his fingers in all bunch of pies. So he was our guitarist, originally, and he came up with a lot of the riffs. Maybe not a lot, but he came up with a, a good minority of the riffs that you hear on the main album and you hear on that demo. And uh, his schedule was just way whack too, and he couldn't really devote a lot of time to it. So he opted out, and we pulled in. I think we eventually pulled in Andy, to take
Andy
over,
Hicks.
Andy Hicks, and it's when it really gelled. I didn't really know Andy that well. I had seen him at shows, and then we had obviously played with him with Gravehill and Morbid Eclipse, and but I didn't know him really personally. But when he came to the studio and we jammed out these songs and had such a good time, that it seemed like an obvious fit that he needs to stay here and write songs with us. Uh, if Morbid Eclipse never does anything else anymore, at least he's here with us using his talent.
I love it, and I love
Yeah,
that you gave him an opportunity too, because he was going through obviously his health issues then, and at the same time too, you guys were trying to find a vocalist, I'm assuming,
yeah.
around this time, and I know you told the story of how Melissa kind of eventually came into the fold here, but give me that story as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah, yeah. So we'd been trying to look for a vocalist, trying to fit. We had originally, again, we always go back to Babcock because he's just an amazing musician, and he has some pipes on him. But and he did some of the singing for some of the demo tracks that you hear. But if I felt in the end we were like, let's see if we can find someone else. And Lily, Rhett's wife, said, "Well, wait a minute. Don't we know a vocalist? Melissa is a vocalist. She's played in cover bands and local bands around in San Bernardino and played all over the place here in Southern California. She's a trained vocalist. Why don't you guys try that?" And then I get texts from Rhett going, "Why didn't you mention Melissa?" And I was like, I forgot.
So after Melissa, kind of joined, you guys find your niche and stuff, and then you release the self-titled record here that I have in my hand. So walk me through this recording process and kind of how it was different than the Gravehill process, or was it
Yeah.
exactly kind of the same ordeal?
Yeah. So I guess heading into that, previous to that, when Melissa agreed to try out first, that we sent her the demo that we had. So there is a demo, has 3 songs I think that are on the LP, and she has her own recording studio because we wanted to get a feel of what she's going to sound like first, and then she sent us back the demo with her vocals layered on top of it. We're like, okay, yeah, this is our vocalist. So, and she was happy to come on, and so she came on. She brought a lot of material with her. She's a skilled keyboardist. I say keyboardist, pianist, and trained and all that stuff. She would bring stuff to us. It's like, oh, I have this idea for a melody. I have this idea for, turn this into a riff. And she really kind of took hold of the range. I mean, Rhett is always the be all end all. He's the hard yes or no for us. But Melissa was bringing all this extra things that, we're thinking outside the box that when we're stuck in our usual heavy metal dunderhead mode, because none of us are classically or professionally trained. And here's a person that is classically and professionally trained, and she's bringing all this stuff to us. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, we can do that. We can do this. And so when you hear like Up From the Depths, a good chunk of that is, Melissa and Nelson collaborating together over whatever things they have to do, and bringing it to band practice and writing these songs. And yeah, it was a little refreshing, to have have Melissa bring that presence and skill with her. I don't know how frustrated she got, when she would say, I'm playing this in the key of B, and we were like, okay, what does that mean? It's like, you mean this B? I mean, we know our notes, but when you think musically, she knows a lot more than we. So she had to walk us through some things, but walking us through and making us more realize that we could create this excellent heavy music using these classic themes of piano music and what she brought. That's how that album eventually got written. And it wasn't too tough of a process. That once we got into, because we recorded the drums with John Haddad, and Nelson took it upon himself, because he has a bunch of recording stuff down. He was building up and he'd been practicing. Nelson's like really obsessive. Get him on get on something. He's like an attack dog on learning something, and that's what he was doing. It was a learning process for him to record us. He was recording the vocals, he recorded the bass, he recorded all the guitars, any keys that Melissa was doing throughout the album. It was all home studio things that he did. And at the time, I didn't realize how much pressure he was under. I wasn't under any pressure. I don't know about Rhett. Rhett was already done with his drum track, so he didn't really have to do anything except come and hang out and, oh, why don't you play this, or just give some suggestions. So I came in and do in fact, I was talking to Nelson just recently, and I said, I thought I was telling Nelson, I was like, I thought you would tell me when I was going to fuck up on bass, because you're being the engineer and recording me. And then I would fuck up and you wouldn't say anything. And I was like, oh shit. Okay, well, it's all up to me now. So whenever I'd fuck up, I tell him to stop. Let's go back. And he's like, okay, let's do it. And then eventually I learned that he was under immense pressure for the album to get everything right, to make sure the levels, and he was watching all this stuff. And I have so much respect for what he did with that home recording. And it's such a powerful album. And we passed those tracks on to Mark Kelson from The Eternal, and he's an amazing musician out in Australia. And Mark came back with notes about things that sounded off, things that maybe you shouldn't put in there. So there's one song, When Old Gods Die, there's a part in there that you don't hear on the record, but it was there eventually earlier. It was like a slow little acoustic part. It sounded cool at first, did not fit the song. And that's totally one of my favorite songs on the album that we never play live, or probably never will play live. But so Mark Kelson did did the mixing of that and kind of gave us that heavy sound. And it was really surprising, because Mark comes from the Eternal is more like kind of a heavy goth, band, and so when he brought this heaviness to the album, now he's done a death metal record with some great people too over there. But he brought back these tracks that were just amazingly powerful. And yeah, and that's where we were.
I love it. And it's almost Candlemassy. It's like very obviously it's more written in the doom metal kind of vein. So
yeah. Well, I think that's what surprised people, that when you say doom metal, a lot of people think maybe stoner doom or something like that, and that they don't expect the Candlemass kind of majestic doom. I call it majestic doom. There's probably a a better
There's so
term
many,
for it.
dude. There's so many genres. I can't even keep up with it anymore.
Yeah, I know.
That's the
But
whole problem.
something to harken back to, Candlemass, I hadn't heard in a while, and I know once the reviews started coming out for the album that, there'd been a niche that wasn't being filled, um, that I think we did because, the album received a ton of positive praise, and it really took off probably more than any of the Gravehill stuff that we did in the past. All those albums combined, just this one album has taken off for us professionally. Before the pandemic, tons of opportunities were coming in, and wow, we're just so thankful that we could, a bunch of knuckle dragging death metal dunderheads can pull this off, with a great maestro at the forefront like Melissa. So
Right, and hey, these opportunities they will come again if once I'm assuming what's next with you guys, you're going to release some more records hopefully with Stygian Crown and Gravehill respectfully. But I think Stygian Crown at this point is kind of like your main band almost, just
yeah,
from the amount of feedback that you guys got.
yeah, we were already on a hiatus with Gravehill anyways before the pandemic happened. So Stygian Crown was our full-time focus, and we didn't even think about even bringing Gravehill back until we were invited to play on California Death Fest in January. I think Evan, the promoter, was looking for bands just to play, and then Rhett suggested Gravehill and Stygian Crown, and he's like, "All right, you're on," and pretty much threw us on there. So there'll be like kind of a resurrection of Gravehill, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm looking forward
Yeah,
to it. But lastly, and I want to thank you again for giving me, a couple hours of your time to do this with me and talk shop and learn a little bit about your specific history. But where can people find who want the physical formats of the latest Stygian Crown record, especially, and the Grateful stuff if you're into the more death metal aspects? But
yeah.
where can people find the specific albums in question?
Yeah, so Stygian Crown can be found through the Stygian Crown Bandcamp for all US side sales. If someone's in Europe, they need to go to Cruz del Sur, the record label, and they can get their stuff through there. I think Cruz del Sur also has a Stygian Crown Bandcamp, so you can go on their Bandcamp and order anything from Europe over there. We handle the merch solely for US. I think that's right. Yeah. Gravehill doesn't have a lot of merch right now. Not on our Bandcamp. But if you're looking for a past album, you're looking for Death Curse, you're looking for the new one, When All Roads, you can find that easily on Dark Descent, on their website or on their Bandcamp. Rights of the Pentagram is out of print, and I don't know if it'll ever be reprinted again. So if you have one out there, you gotta one of a kind.
I love it. Well, Jason, thank you very much again. Like I said, for giving me a couple hours of your time to do this with me. Always appreciate our conversations and question, and I look forward to doing many more with you, hopefully in the near future. But for another episode of Poppitt's Corner, guys, I'm out of here. Cheers.